Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The heavy oak door didn't creak. It swung open with the silent, predatory grace of a tomb unsealed, revealing the one sight that could stop Julian's heart faster than a blade between the ribs. He didn't scream. He couldn't. The air in his lungs solidified into jagged glass as he stared at the sprawling, velvet-draped bed where his husband, the terrifying, untouchable Duke Kalen Varick, lay entangled with another man. The scene was a violent tableau of heat and skin. Kalen's head thrown back, his throat exposed, sweat glistening like diamonds on his alabaster chest, while a slender, dark-haired stranger straddled his hips, hands pressed firmly against the Duke's heaving sternum. The scent of ozone and burnt sugar, the pheromones of high-stress magic, hit Julian like a physical blow, choking him, blinding him with the visceral reality of his own inadequacy. Kalen's eyes, usually the color of frozen steel, snapped open and locked onto Julian's, wide with a horror that looked sickeningly like guilt. Julian slammed the door. The sound was a thunderclap that shattered the oppressive silence of the Varick estate. He didn't wait for an explanation. He didn't wait to hear the lies that would inevitably spill from those aristocratically sculpted lips. He turned on his heel, his boots skidding on the polished marble of the corridor, and ran. He ran not just away from the room, but away from the 3 years of cold silence, the 3 years of dutifully playing the neglected spouse in a political marriage that had saved his family from ruin, but cost him his soul. He ran past the portraits of Kalen's ancestors, who seemed to sneer down at him, the unwanted Omega who couldn't even keep his alpha's attention. Julian, stop. The voice was a roar, deeper than the rumble of the coming storm outside, vibrating through the floorboards. It was the voice Kalen used to command legions, to sentence traitors, to silence courtrooms. It triggered a primal instinct in Julian, part fear, part obedience. But tonight, the heartbreak was louder. Julian scrambled down the grand staircase, his breath hitching in ragged sobs. He reached the heavy front doors, his fingers fumbling with the iron latch. He had to get out. He had to get into the rain, into the cold, anywhere that wasn't this suffocating mausoleum of a marriage. Shadows erupted from the floor. They weren't natural shadows cast by the flickering sconces. They were tendrils of pure darkness, Kalen's signature magic. They lashed out like vipers, wrapping around Julian's wrists and ankles, not hurting him, but binding him with unyielding force. He cried out, tugging uselessly against the smoke like bonds, just as Kalen materialized at the top of the stairs. The Duke looked nothing like the composed, icy figure Julian saw at breakfast every morning. His silk shirt was torn open, revealing the sculpted expanse of his chest, which was now marred by angry, red geometric patterns, veins pulsating with a sickly violet light. He looked wrecked, feverish, and terrifyingly dangerous. "Let me go," Julian spat, the words tearing from his throat. "I saw what I saw, Kalen. I won't stay here and be humiliated. You have your whore. You don't need your trophy." Kalen descended the stairs, not with his usual fluid grace, but with a staggering, heavy gait. He looked like a man walking through a hurricane. "You saw nothing but your own assumptions," Kalen rasped, his voice sounding as though it was being dragged over gravel. "Do not open that door, Julian. If you leave the wards of this house tonight, you will die." "Is that a threat?" Julian laughed bitterly, tears finally spilling over. "You're going to kill me to keep me quiet? Just like the rumors said you killed your first betrothed." Kalen flinched. It was a microscopic movement, a slight recoil as if he'd been slapped, but on his stoic face, it was a landslide. He stopped 3 steps above Julian, gripping the banister so hard the wood splintered under his hand. "That man," Kalen said, pointing a trembling finger back toward the bedroom, "is a siphon, a medical practitioner of the chaotic arts." Julian froze, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a cold confusion. "A siphon. My blood," Kalen choked out, clutching his chest where the red markings were glowing brighter, pulsing in time with his erratic heartbeat. "The Varick bloodline carries a curse. The abyssal blight. It generates more magical energy than a human vessel can contain. If it isn't drained, if it isn't siphoned off physically, I burn from the inside out. I go mad. And then I explode, taking everything within a 5-mile radius with me. Julian stared at him. The logic held, but the betrayal still stung. You were sick? For 3 years? And you didn't tell me? You let me believe you hated me? You let me believe you couldn't stand to touch me because I wasn't good enough? Kaylin descended the final steps, the shadows around Julian's wrists softening, turning into caresses before dissipating. He collapsed to his knees, the Grand Duke Kaylin Varick, kneeling on the floor before his discarded husband. He looked up, his eyes swimming with a mixture of physical agony and raw desperation. I didn't tell you, Kaylin whispered, because the only permanent cure isn't a siphon. It's a bond. A soul bond with a partner whose magical core is compatible. But the bonding process for the blight is violent, Julian. It is dangerous. It requires the partner to absorb half the toxicity. I saw you. So bright, so gentle. I couldn't risk you. I would rather endure the siphons and the pain and your hatred than risk burning you to ash. The silence that followed was heavier than the shadows. Julian looked down at the man he had legally married but never known. He saw the tremor in Kaylin's hands. He saw the exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. He realized, with a sudden, crushing clarity, that the coldness hadn't been indifference. It had been restraint. Kaylin hadn't been avoiding him out of disgust. He had been staying away to protect him. You idiot, Julian whispered, his voice trembling. Kaylin blinked, his vision clearly blurring as the fever spiked. I know. You noble, arrogant, self-sacrificing idiot. Julian dropped to his knees, disregarding the difference in their stations, the difference in their power. He reached out and placed his hands on Kaylin's burning face. The heat was intense, radiating through Julian's palms, but it wasn't painful. It felt familiar, like a key sliding into a lock. Julian, don't, Kaylin gasped, trying to pull away. The siphon. Valerius. He didn't finish. The levels are critical. If you touch me for too long, the blight will try to jump. Let it, Julian said fiercely. No, Kaylin roared, his eyes flashing violet. I will not kill you. You won't kill me, Julian countered, his voice steadying as his own resolve hardened. He was done being the victim. He was done being the passive observer of his own life. My family. The reason we fell from grace was because we have the solar affinity. We are batteries, Kaylin. We don't just hold magic, we transmute it. Why do you think your father arranged this marriage? He knew. Kaylin stared at him, dazed. My father. He said it was for land rights. He lied, Julian said. He wanted you cured, but he didn't have the courage to tell you the price. Julian moved closer, pressing his forehead against Kaylin's. I am not fragile, Kaylin. I am not glass. I am the sun that can hold your shadow. But you have to let me in. You have to stop protecting me and start trusting me. Kaylin's breathing was ragged. The violet veins were creeping up his neck now, threatening to reach his face. If we do this, if we bond, there is no undoing it. You will be tied to the darkness forever. You will feel my pain, my rage, my hunger. And you will feel my light, Julian whispered, brushing his thumb over Kaylin's cheekbone. You will feel my hope. And you will feel my love, you stubborn fool. Because I have loved you since the day you stood between me and the King's Guard, even before we were married. Kaylin let out a sound that was half sob, half growl. The resistance broke. He surged forward, capturing Julian's lips in a kiss that tasted of iron, storm, and desperation. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision of worlds. The moment their lips met, the world dissolved. Julian felt a sensation like being hooked up to a lightning rod. Power, ancient and cold, flooded into him, rushing through his veins like ice water. It slammed into his core, the warm, golden wellspring of his solar magic. Pain flared, white-hot and blinding, but Julian didn't pull away. He pressed closer, wrapping his arms around Kaylin's broad shoulders, anchoring him. He visualized his own magic, not as a shield, but as a furnace. He took the cold, biting darkness of the blight and fed it into his inner fire. Burn, he thought. Burn it clean. In the library of his mind, he saw the barriers crumbling. He saw Kaylin's memories, years of isolation, the physical torture of the siphoning rituals, the nights spent watching Julian from afar, aching to touch him but terrified of corrupting him. The cheating scene replayed, But this time Julian felt Kalen's revulsion, his humiliation at having to be touched by a stranger just to survive another day for Julian's sake. "I've got you," Julian murmured against Kalen's lips. "I'm here." The hallway around them exploded with light. It wasn't the harsh, artificial light of magic lamps, but a swirling vortex of gold and violet. The shadows that had bound Julian earlier now danced with the golden particles of his own aura, twisting together, merging, forming a new, unbreakable weave. Kalen groaned, his back arching as the pressure in his chest finally released. The angry red markings on his skin began to recede, the violet pulsing slowing to a steady, rhythmic beat that matched the thrumming of Julian's own heart. For a long time, there was only the sound of their ragged breathing and the soft hum of the settling magic. Slowly, the light faded, leaving them in the dim warmth of the hallway. Kalen was slumped against Julian, his head resting on Julian's shoulder, his heavy weight a comfort rather than a burden. Julian ran his fingers through Kalen's sweat-dampened hair. "Better." Kalen lifted his head. The icy steel of his eyes had melted. They were dark, dilated, and filled with an emotion so intense it made Julian shiver. "Quiet," Kalen rasped. "Excuse me." "The noise," Kalen whispered, looking around as if seeing the world for the first time. "The screaming in my blood. It's gone. For the first time in 20 years. It's silent." He looked back at Julian, replacing the pain. "You did that." "We did that," Julian corrected. He tried to stand, but his legs felt like jelly. The bonding had taken a toll, draining his reserves. Kalen moved instantly. The weakness that had crippled him moments ago was gone, replaced by the terrifying, fluid strength of a true alpha. He scooped Julian up into his arms as easily as if he were made of paper. "Kalen, you are exhausted," Kalen stated, turning toward the grand staircase. "Your core is depleted." "I'm fine," Julian protested weakly, though he instinctively curled into Kalen's chest. "Where are we going?" "To bed," Kalen said, his voice low and rumbling with a possessiveness that made Julian's toes curl. Julian stiffened. The siphon. Is he still?" Kalen paused. A dark look crossed his face. "Valerius has likely fled. He knows what a completed bond feels like. He knows he is no longer needed. And if he is still there..." Kalen's eyes narrowed. "I will throw him out the window myself." Julian let out a startled laugh. "That seems excessive." "He touched me," Kalen growled, continuing up the stairs. "And you saw it. I should have executed him for the optics alone." "You're tyrannical," Julian muttered, hiding his smile in Kalen's shirt. "I am yours," Kalen corrected. "I am entirely, irrevocably yours, Julian Varick. And I will spend the rest of my life making up for the 3 years I wasted trying to save you from myself." They reached the bedroom. The door was still open, the bed still rumpled from the ritual that had gone wrong. The scent of ozone was fading, replaced by the cleaner, sharper scent of rain blowing in from the open balcony and the warm, woodsy smell of Kalen. Kalen kicked the door shut behind them. He carried Julian to the bed, not the side where the siphon had been, but the other side, the pristine side that had remained empty for so long. He laid Julian down with a reverence reserved for holy relics. Kalen didn't pull away. He climbed in beside him, fully clothed, pulling the heavy duvet over them both. He wrapped his arms around Julian, pulling him back against his chest, burying his face in the crook of Julian's neck. "Sleep," Kalen commanded softly. "I will guard your dreams." Julian felt the steady, powerful beat of Kalen's heart against his back. He felt the hum of their bond, a golden thread pulling them tight. The fear, the isolation, the misunderstanding, it was all ash, burned away by the fire they had created. "Kalen," Julian whispered as sleep tugged at his eyelids. "HMN. Next time you're dying, lead with that. Don't let me find you with a stranger." Kalen's arm tightened around him. "There will be no strangers. Never again. There is only you." Julian smiled, closing his eyes. The storm outside raged on, but inside, everything was finally, perfectly still. The next morning, the staff of the Varick estate moved with hushed trepidation. They expected shouting. They expected the Omega to be packed and gone, or perhaps the Duke to be in one of his dark, destructive moods. Instead, when the heavy doors of the dining hall opened, they saw something that defied all gossip. Duke Kalen sat at the head of the table, looking more vibrant and powerful than he had in a decade. His skin was clear, his posture relaxed. And sitting to his right, not at the far end of the table as was custom, but intimately close, was Julian. Kalen was peeling a pear. He sliced a piece with surgical precision and, ignoring the shocked gasps of the footmen, held it to Julian's lips. Julian flushed pink but opened his mouth, accepting the offering. Kalen's eyes watched him, dark and hungry, a predator who had finally realized that his greatest strength was not his solitude, but his mate. "Eat," Kalen murmured, his voice carrying through the silent room. "You need your strength. We have a great deal of time to make up for." Julian chewed, swallowing the sweet fruit, and met his husband's gaze. He saw the challenge there, the promise of intensity, the heat of a bond that could burn down the world if they weren't careful. He smiled, reaching under the table to rest his hand on Kalen's knee. "I'm not going anywhere, Alpha," Julian said softly. Kalen covered Julian's hand with his own, interlacing their fingers. "Good. Because I would tear the world apart to bring you back." And that is how the viper tamed the wolf, not with chains, but by stepping into the fire alongside him. If you enjoyed seeing Julian take control and claim his place, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who kept a deadly secret to protect you? Or is trust more important than survival? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,